Now, one thing I didn't point out that I should point out is that all of these instruments are what come with Ableton Live Suite. If you see less instruments here, it means that you're on a lighter version of Live. You might be on Live Standard or Live Lite, I think it's called. This is really the biggest difference in those different versions of Live. Standard gives you all the instruments, the other ones give you less. Um, I think the same is true with audio effects. You might have less audio effects if you're on a smaller version. Um, but this is why I think Live Suite is really important, is because it gives us access to all of these instruments, which are really quite powerful instruments. Okay, that being said, I want to talk about this idea of freezing and flattening. When we talk about freezing and flattening a track, what we're talking about is, in this case, converting a MIDI track to an audio track, which is to say, to take the instrument and the MIDI clip and print it or write it as an audio track, right? So right now, as a MIDI track, we can move notes around, we can do whatever we want. But once we convert it to an audio track, we can't do that. So I could take a track like this. Let's just look at this. Okay, and I could print this as an audio track. Why would I want to do that? If it's working perfectly fine as a MIDI track, why convert it to an audio track? There's a couple reasons why you might want to do this. One is if you have hundreds of MIDI tracks going and hundreds of instruments and not a super fast computer, your computer can start bogging down, right? And can start really having a hard time playing all of those instruments. They take up a lot of your computer processing. So if you want to lighten the load and you're happy with one and you know you're not going to change any notes, you can convert it to an audio track and that can free up resources. That's one reason. Another reason is, let's say that this instrument, let's go to this one. Okay, let's say this instrument is using the wavetable instrument. Okay, that's this one. Now, someone who has Live Lite or Live Standard probably doesn't have the wavetable instrument. I think that's true. So if I'm sending this track to somebody who's using that version of the software, they're not going to have the instrument to play this. So they're not going to hear that track. Okay? At least they're not going to hear it the way that I'm hearing it, right? They might be able to put a different instrument on that track and hear it, but that's different. I want them to hear exactly what I'm hearing. So, if I want them to hear it the way I'm hearing it, I need to convert this to an audio track, or else they're not going to be able to hear it right. So that's another reason. A third reason is that it's if you like kind of glitchy effects, those are sometimes easier to do to an audio file than to a MIDI file. Things like chopping it up by like the millisecond and like reordering it and things like that. So here's how you do it. Now we can do this to an audio file as well. And when we do it to an audio file, this idea of freezing and flattening, what we're basically going to do is take all the effects that are on it and print them into the audio file. Okay, so this isn't just for MIDI files. A really good reason for that is just to free up processing power. But this is something that we end up doing every now and then, is freezing and flattening a track. So here's how you do it. Let's take this MIDI track, for example. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to the track name. I'm going to control click on it, and I'm going to select freeze track. Okay, so there are two steps to this. What freeze track will do is kind of temporarily disable everything and just make an audio track out of it, but I still have access to the MIDI info because I can unfreeze this. Okay? So when it's frozen, it means I can't edit these notes, right? Like, it's not going to let me edit these notes. I'm clicking, I'm dragging, can't do anything. I can still hear it just fine, right? But it's not using up any processing power, and it's essentially an audio track. The good thing about freezing a track is that it frees up processing power, and we can unfreeze it. So I can do that same thing again and say unfreeze the track, right? If I do that, then we're going to go back to using the instrument. We can move around notes. We can do whatever we want. But if I'm super sure that I'm done editing stuff, I can freeze the track. Then after it's frozen, I can do that again and say flatten a track. You have to freeze it first in order to flatten it. Flatten it is going to permanently convert the track to an audio file. Okay? And not just these clips, everything on that track. Okay, so let's do it. Flatten track. Now we have an audio file. Okay? It'll sound the same. Right? But it's an audio file now. So if we go look at where our instrument was, it's empty because we don't have instruments on audio tracks. So freezing and flattening a file is a useful, or a track is a useful thing that we have to do on occasion. There are some musical reasons to do it, like that glitching kind of stuff. But most of the time when I'm doing it, it's to be able to share it with somebody who doesn't have a particular plugin I have or something like that.